Hello and thank you for joining us on Newsnight. I'm Neo Taigbe. Nigeria is the most populous nation in Africa and has the 7th highest population in the world. It became a member of the United Nations on October the 7th, 1960, and this is just 6 days after gaining independence on October the 1st. Since then, Nigeria has, as a member state, has continued to take on roles that will contribute to the objectives of the United Nations. For instance, in 2012, Nigeria contributed the 5th largest number of peacekeepers to the United Nations peacekeeping operations. Interesting indeed. The United Nations has the SDGs, or Project 2030, a set of 17 interconnected goals which have targets with at least 1 or 2 indicators for each target, including an end to poverty, securing the planet, and ensuring that everyone enjoys peace and prosperity by 2030. It was adopted by 193 countries, with Nigeria being one of those countries. Now, Nigeria is one of the countries that presented its voluntary national review in 2017 and 2020 on the implementation of the SDGs at the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. In 2020 also, Nigeria ranked 160 on the 2020 World's SDG Index. But is that a place to be among the Committee of Nations? Is that a good place? My guest believes that Nigeria is doing good and just needs a push here and there to get to the desired mark. Well, he should know, because about 5 years ago, he was in the field visiting at least 21 states of the Federation to see how the children are living. Today, he has a unique job of coordinating all the United Nations agencies in the country. Newsnight sat down for a conversation with Mr. Mohammed Fall, the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator in Nigeria. We started our conversation with food. Yes, food. Mr. Mohammed Malik Fall, thank you for speaking to us on Newsnight.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me in your program.
You know, you were here, the last time you were in Nigeria was about 5 years ago. You were working with the UNICEF then. What was it like for you at that time?
Well, at that time it was quite tough and quite challenging, because at that time our operation was mostly focused in the Northeast. It was 2016 to 2019. Some of the local government area that was controlled by the insurgency was just liberated. There was people behind those lines who haven't got any services for years, and we needed to respond to that. It was a time also where the wild virus of polio have re-emerged from, of course, the Northeast, and where we had to launch a big and massive immunization program to control the virus. And I saw that, we have been successful in the sense that 3-4 years later, thanks to the effort made in Nigeria, the African continent was certified free from the polio virus. But we had also education program, child protection program, and we had also engaged into partnership with the private sector, mainly from our office in Lagos. Number of things that was quite keeping us busy at that time.
Well, in all of that busyness, as busy as you were, you had time to venture into Nigeria, to see Nigeria for what it is.
Indeed, I think I have done those days over 25 states that I visited, build relationship with the partner in the local government, had a range of governors with whom I had a strong partnership, travel to the country and see the sense, and have a sense of what the country was. And why we are saying that Nigeria is the biggest country in our continent. It's not only, I think, from the demographic perspective, it's the culture, it's the economy, it's the innovation. It's a number of things that I could discover. And
did you have the opportunity to taste the Nigerian food?
I did, and I know where you are attracting me to. But
no, you have to talk about it. Jollof rice. I mean, the fight is basically Nigeria, Ghana, but Senegal,
we are saying the fight is Nigeria, Ghana. Let me say something. Let's just let the Ghanaian and the Nigerian finish the fight, then we come in as the one who really own the jollof rice.
Oh, really? Okay, now it's going to turn from a as we say in local parlance, 2-man fight to a 3-man fight. But it's okay. Talking about food, The UN's launching a program here in Nigeria that some will say targeted at food security, so to speak. You know, talking about the lean season plan for Bay states.
Here in the House, in partnership with the national emergency agencies, the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Planning and Budget, and also the state of Yobe, Adamawa, and Borno, we have launched what we call the lean season plan. Because, as you know, food insecurity and malnutrition remain a major challenge, not only in this country, but I think globally speaking. And I felt that given the fact that the lean season is from May to September, it's unfortunately a period where we witness a deterioration in the food security and the malnutrition. And we wanted to really launch this plan and call for generosity of the donor, but mostly also mobilize the entire society, starting from the government, to respond to the need of the most vulnerable people during this period. It's a period where we see a spike in malnutrition, mainly acute malnutrition, which we know is the leading cause to death for under 5 children, for lactating women, for pregnant women, for elderlies, for people living with disabilities. I think those vulnerable people needed a special protection, mainly in the context of those 3 regions that, as we say earlier, have been affected by over a decade of conflict, displacement, and number of hardship that could exacerbate and further deteriorate the food security situation.
We will delve into the food security matter in a bit, but let's step back a bit and talk about these 3 states you mentioned, Yobe, Adamawa, and Borno, the Bay states as they might be put together. What would be needed to ensure nutrition, for instance, enough food, considering that the farmers are actually afraid of going? Most of them don't even want to go back to the farms, and many are still displaced. What do you think would be needed to get everybody back in there?
I think the first need is security, improve the security situation, because those regions are known also as regions that have large potential, mainly when it comes to agriculture. They are able to produce food that could be enough for them, and even they could contribute to food production for the country and probably for the sub-region. But as we say, the prerequisite is always security. And I think those regions have gone through difficult time. The insurgency of Boko Haram started in 2009. Since then, it's prevailing, though I have seen a lot of change and big positive development. I was here early 2016. We were talking about, in the peak of the insurgency, 22 local government areas out of 27 only in Borno State controlled by the insurgency. You look at now, the insurgency doesn't control any of the local government area. Probably they have spot here and there. They could attack here and there. They are still operating, but you cannot compare it to that time. And I think a huge shift and movement have been made throughout this time. Now, what we need is also to secure that the attack that are sporadic and that are sometimes affecting the community are stopped, for the community to have the freedom to go back to their farm. And this is why also we are now moving from the emergency response, from the humanitarian assistance to what we call durable solution. Durable solution being the only way you can sustain the support that are given to the community. And we are strongly engaged with the governor of those 3 states. In fact, in the 27th of May, which is a bit more than a week from now, the Vice President is going to launch this initiative that was supported by the UN Secretary General and supported in 15 countries. And we are proud to say that Nigeria, out of those 15 countries that count for the biggest number of displaced people in the world, Nigeria is the most advanced in terms of planning for durable solution. And that's why this launch is taking place here in Abuja with the presence of the Assistant Secretary General, who is in charge of this program across the globe. Now, durable solutions require also massive undertaking, because for people to go back to their place, they need house, they need home. And home is not only the material place where you live, but it's a kind of psychology also, that you have somewhere to go back. That's what gives you the sense that you are returning to where you belong to. But I think also home alone is not enough, because as we say, people need to access to livelihood. They need to go back to farming. They need to have services for their children when it comes to education, for themselves also, health services, water and sanitation. It's a package that you offer, and for which we are seeing also massive progress taking place in those 3 states. And I think that's where we will find a sustainable way of addressing these problems that is recurrent, that we face every year. We can't, every year that the lean season comes, we start launching an appeal. And I think the best way of solving these things in a durable way and sustainable way is just to give people the livelihood they need to produce for themselves and break this over-reliance on humanitarian assistance and on donation.
But if you say they should break the seeming over-reliance on humanitarian assistance, some of them begin to wonder, how is it then that it looks as if more humanitarian agencies continue to come in? It's as if there is something that they're gaining beyond just offering humanitarian service to the people.
I'm not sure that the numbers and the evidence show that we are having an increasing footprint of the humanitarian organization. I remember being here 2016, 2017, we used to launch an appeal for humanitarian assistance of 1.2, 1.3 billion. And those days, we were meeting the generosity of the international community, and it was, yielding big result. But if you compare it today, the appeal we launched for this year is around 300 million, and those 300 million, as we speak, we are mid-May, and it's only 6% funded. And I think that's a general trend that we are seeing, not only because there are so many other humanitarian hotspots in the world. You have Gaza, you have Ukraine, you have Sudan, you name them. And all of these new hotspots are coming on top of protracted crises that have been there. And the humanitarian resources are shrinking, and I don't think that it will allow a step up or a scale up on the humanitarian footprint here in the country. And what you have also is that the government is more and more aware of the fact that most of the issues you deal with on a humanitarian basis can help you to save life immediately. It can help you to reduce the vulnerability of the people, but it cannot help you to find a solution which is sustainable. And this is why this shift we are making now to work on durable solution, to work on state plan, to work a plan that have housing, that have basic services, that have livelihood, that have skill for people to increase their ability to produce. That's why we are focusing on that, and this is the shift that we are making right now as I speak.
Let's look at it again. I said earlier that we'll delve into the food security situation. So far we have the rains have set in, and so we see that areas where there used to be a lot of farming, some people are attempting to go back to their farms. Some are even turning their backyards to farms just so that they can produce food. So it's not as though the citizens or the residents of the country and beyond are not thinking about that. You talked about security. The challenges that they are. Would the UN be considering supporting in these other areas beyond just the security? The country is making efforts. But would the UN be considering looking at other aspects to encourage people to go back to the farm?
Let me just be clear. I think we talk about the security in relation to what is prevailing in the Northeast. But overall, I think food security is being constrained by security, yes, in many places in the world, in Nigeria and outside of Nigeria. But you have also many other drivers that are constraining food security. You take the climate crisis. As we speak now, flooding is taking place in so many countries in the world. Nigeria 2022 had maybe its worst flood in decades, affecting 4.2 million people. And I don't know how much farming land or crops have been destroyed through it. And the flood, unfortunately, is alternating with drought. Mainly, good part of Nigeria is in the ecosystem that we are calling the Sahel, and which is affected so significantly by drought. Then you have also the resources that you need for producing in the agricultural area, like fertilizer. Fertilizer today is constrained. The biggest supplier of fertilizer is Russia. And we all know that with the crisis that is going around Ukraine, that has been constrained. You have the war in Ukraine, because also food production is something, but food import is something else. I know a country like Nigeria could depends heavily when it comes to wheat, for example, on import. Being told that 95% of the wheat consumed in Nigeria is imported, and we know that the biggest producer is Ukraine, and the current crisis is constraining, for example, that supply chain. Just to say that when we talk about food productions being constrained and being challenged, it's many factors that come into play. Security is probably one of them, but the climate shock and climate crisis is another one. The international context and all the conflicts, not only that are affecting the supply chain, but that are also driving up the increased price of energy, which we know also impact on the transport of goods. Number of things are there, and that's why I think that we need to look at the issues of the food crisis, not only in the context of the security, but it goes beyond security. And I think this is valid for Nigeria as it is for the rest of the world.
You know, when I asked that question, I wasn't expecting you to take me beyond the security point. I was going to build up from there. But so let's go back a bit and look at, when I asked the question, would the UN be considering support in the area of food security? For instance, yes, you talked about climate change. I know that's a conversation that's been going back and forth, what everyone needs to do as regards climate change. The other bit about is also infrastructure. Because when you talk about most of the wheat produced or consumed in Nigeria is imported, some will say that may not exactly be true, because most of the wheat produced is not transported from the hinterlands to the market areas. So infrastructure is a problem. So when we talk about it from that angle, what would the UN be thinking to do?
Let's be clear. If you look at the market of Nigeria today, the biggest problem you have is not the availability of food. It's the accessibility to food. It's people to have the money they need to buy the food. That's why we are saying that the first mitigation measure that the UN is ready to support the government through is how we can put a kind of safety net program that help the poorest. Because those poorest, if you give them cash, they would be able to access to food based on the market prices. If the demand is if the supply is able to meet the demand, the need you work on, the area you need to work on is the area of giving or increasing the purchasing power of the people to be able to buy the food. That's the same point you raised by saying, okay, wheat maybe could be challenged. The figures I have given, although it is grounded on documents that WFP have shared, but I know also there are some other products like millet, like maize, that are available in the market, but that are not affordable for people. How you make people access to those products? That's another point also I wanted to bring in this discussion around food security. Because even if you look at the way we support during the lean season or any other support we are providing nationwide, it's not building only on taking food in kind and going to distribute it. This is becoming obsolete as a way of operating in the humanitarian or in the development context. People use voucher, people use cash transfer, people use different modalities that reduce the transaction cost, but also give people possibility. You know, you give someone a bag of rice, but maybe if you give him the price of that bag of rice, the person can mix rice, vegetable, other products that are part of the food system that they would like to take. And I think this is why we are insisting on the fact that in the current context of the country, we are ready and to support the government to step up its work in the social protection scheme. Because that's the only way you can transfer cash to people, you can give to people possibility to have access to the food, which to me is available in the market, but that the people cannot access simply because of question of price or money they have.
So what's the offer? How would this offer work? Helping the government to put on a social safety net. that would ensure people have access to these foods or can afford the foods or whatever it is they want to. More like saying, don't just give them fish, teach them how to fish. So what would that offer be? What would the offer look like?
The offer is...
That's the UN offer.
The UN offer is multiple-fold
Okay.
because, as I say, first of all, you are in a context where the government have a strong desire and a strong ambition to mitigate the impact of these economic challenges on the most poorest people. They are already talking about increasing from 3 million households to 15 million households the social protection scheme and the cash transfer program that they are managing on their own, partly financed by the government own resources, partly financed by World Bank. And when I say World Bank, it's the government own resources, because if they take the loan, they will have to reimburse it. But the problem you have while conducting the social protection scheme of this scale, most of the time is the ground and the base on which you are launching the program. You need to make sure that you have a strong data analysis that identify the most vulnerable. Because for this program to be trusted and for this program to really get the support of the people have to believe that it's those who deserve it that get the money, but not other way around. I think getting a good data system that help you to analyze the vulnerability of the people, assess who should be the target of the program, and on that, it's a comparative advantage of UN. We have specialized agencies like WFP, have been doing it in the humanitarian context, organization like UNICEF, organization like ILO. All of these organizations, UNDP, are data-driven organizations that can help at least on the vulnerability assessment. Now, once you have the assessment properly done and the targeting, your other big area of work become how you make sure that when the money is transferred, it reaches where it should go. And this, you cannot do it without having a proper monitoring system. I'm seeing now, for example, in many countries in the world, even all the cash program have a prerequisite that everyone gets a mobile phone, and then the money is transferred through mobile money, and that gives a kind of tracing possibility that shows that every penny that is spent in this program reach those who deserve to have it.
That matter of trust. So how do we begin to build that trust?
I think the trust is, first of all, you have to demonstrate result. If you have a program that you demonstrate that everyone who benefit from the program are those who deserve it, or those that for whom it was designed, that's already a source of trust. Making the program known in a way that, you know, it's not just because you are in Abuja or Lagos or the big cities that you are aware, but even if you are in the most remote area also, and you are eligible, you are aware of the program, which is not always the case. Many programs that was designed, you would look at, if you ask people in the big cities, because of their way they are connected to media or to mass media, or they are connected to internet, they might be aware, but those who deserve it, and just because they are in a remote places or because of distance, might not be aware. And I think that's also another part of trust building, which is to take and increase the outreach program to the point that it reaches the most vulnerable that are in the most remote areas, unfortunately. And of course, also bring a conversation that shows clearly that this is a government program led by the government, but the entire international community is behind supporting. And there is no one who represents better the international community than the UN. And I think that's why I feel that in that process of building trust, our presence and our role also is critical. It's not only about data, it's not only about monitoring, it's not about the robustness of the system, but it's about also the communication and the visibility you give to the program to make sure that everyone who is desired to be rich will be rich and will be aware of the benefit of this program.
Thank you again for speaking with us. And so far, the conversation has really been interesting, and I'm hungry as we speak. So when we finish, we'll go. I don't know how quickly we can get to Senegal to have that jollof rice. But Ghanaians and Nigerians out there, don't worry. We'll just let you know what the Senegal jollof rice tastes like if you haven't had it. But let's get back to this and start off from, yes, we're talking about building trust. The matter of building trust is something across, not just in Nigeria. The trust between government and the citizens, I mean, the lead and the leadership is one that where it is neither here nor there. And a lot of people will talk about we need to rebuild trust. At a certain time, even the trust for the UN has dwindled in some parts, and many because they do not understand. For instance, we've been hearing the Sustainable Development Goals over and over and over again. What's going on? Are we ever going to get them met?
As you mentioned, rightly, it's something that we are seeing across the globe. It's not only in Nigeria that you have these issues that a citizen may be raising question or maybe lacking trust on leadership. It's something you see even in those called Western countries. But I feel that I can't characterize it like just lack of trust. It's a time also where people think that this reliance on a state or on a leadership who do something from them is almost ending. And more, and you can see it through the young people. They are taking initiative, they are going out of their way, they are innovating, they are making things to take care of themselves. That's not probably, we need to find a balance between, having a trust on the leadership that you elect to do something for you, and yourself also space that you need to occupy it for your own self. And that's the area and the place where I want to bring the SDG as and to respond to your question. For me, if I look at today's world, the SDG is the biggest social contract that exists. It starts from SDG 1 on poverty up to SDG 17 to partnership, and touch upon everything that can improve well-being of people. Address, when you talk about poverty, it's basically the issues of inequality. And for me, there is no greater social justice than equality. Then as an agenda, I can call it really one of the most advanced social contracts that exists as we speak. Now, it's taking place in a world which have gone through also a certain number of challenges. One of them being the global pandemic we have gone through. We have seen 2020 to 2022 almost, the whole world was shut down. Supply chain was stopped, communication was stopped, production was affected, income generation was affected. And all of these things has impacted badly to the point that we have seen even area where we were making progress on the SDG, we experienced significant setback. And we have seen in the last Human Development Report that was published this year in March, that many indicators are back now even to a level which is lower than where they were before 2015. This is why this notion of acceleration and what we call, maybe using the UN jargon, let's rescue the SDG, is really timely. And this is why recently the Secretary General, the Deputy Secretary General has come with an agenda that they call the 6th Transition Pathway, because the time we have now for 2030 has gone almost to maybe less than 6 years, or at most 6 years. And that have reduced so significantly the time we had to achieve or to attain the SDG that we need to think out of the box and come with acceleration strategy and acceleration plan in order to address the SDG. But let's not just put everything on the COVID and use it as a scapegoat. I was talking about also the climate crisis. And the climate crisis raised a notion of justice, because if you look at the country that needs more the SDG are the developing countries. But look at the kind of price they are paying to the climate crisis.
Yeah.
Look at, for example, and I was always saying that if there is any injustice in today's world, it's on the climate front that you see it. You have seen developing countries that are contributing for less than 4% of the global emission, but look at the price they are paying when it comes to drought, when it comes to flood, when it comes to all sorts of shock that really take people back. That's one aspect. But conflict also is coming back. And when you talk about conflict, today it's not only then one hotspot here or, a few 50, 100 people. We talk about 1,000 people. Look at what's happening in Gaza. Look at what's happening in Sudan. Look at what's happening in Ukraine. And now it's as if the world is coming back to a point where we think that any dispute should be settled only by using gun. And I think conflict is also one of the major setbacks for some of the development goal and development achievement.
Is that not a product of the crumbling of the trust levels across the world? I mean, if everybody thinks that for every conflict we need to use weapons to settle it, is that a product, is that not a fallout of the crumbling of the trust there?
Definitely it's reverse compared to the doctrine, which is the founding principle of the UN, which is peace and security, which is protection of human rights, which is promoting of development. Because let's not forget that UN was created in the aftermath of a world war, where the world almost was in the brink of destroying itself. That's how this notion of UN came. But that's why even if we are seeing here and there people coming back to this notion that all disputes have to be settled by war, it is our time and it is our role to double down on the role of UN in bringing peace. The reason why I'm saying it's important is that this year, in September, there is what we call the Summit of the Future, which to me is one of the biggest summits the international community have taken recently, and which will be looking at a kind of pact that look at the world and how you can bring back peace. Because we cannot continue to have progress or to experience progress anywhere in the world if conflict is taking the dimension that it starts taking. That everywhere you have hotspot, everywhere that two people have differences or have any sorts of dispute, the only way of settling it is each one rush to gun. That's one aspect, but I think also the pact of the summit will come out also with a kind of revigorated narrative and mobilization around the SDGs. Because as I say, it's a social contract, and if we miss it, we are going to set all the path for the failure of humanity. Because if you don't address poverty, you don't address anger, you don't address education, you don't address health, you don't address water and sanitation, you don't address climate, you don't address urban setting, you don't address economic prosperities. What are you offering for a future for humanity? And for me, that's why I was saying that these SDGs are not only a social contract, but it's also a way of giving hope to humanity and giving them force that can drive them. Because if we just stay in looking at the news and the war that is prevailing here and there, we wouldn't be there. But now, what we don't speak a lot about is that we are at a time also where the world has more opportunity to address development challenges than any time.
So, again, I'm looking at my notes here and I'm seeing this phrase, the 6 transitions, as a means of accelerating the SDGs. Well, how would those 6 transitions play in this move to rescue the SDGs?
Let me maybe take you through those 6 transitions very quickly. They are food security and agriculture, we spoke about it. They are social protection and access to job, we spoke about it on cash transfer. It's education, which to me is the game changer for development. It is digitalization, which to me offers to humanity the biggest opportunity of positive transformation. And it is the climate crisis, which to me, if we don't address it, we are compromising even our future as a mankind in this planet. And those acceleration, not only they can help to cut the poverty and to cut the suffering of people, but each one of those transition pathways have a kind of multiplying effect in all the development segment. If you take the 17 SDG, if you address food security and improve agriculture, if you address education, if you address climate crisis, if you address energy, if you address digitalization and social protection, you will have a positive impact and a transformative impact on almost all the area of human being well-being. And I think that's one of the thinking and the philosophy that is behind. You accelerate on those, and then you get the multiplying effect across the SDGs, but not only that we are thinking the one SDG is left or the 6 are only the priority, but those 6, if we make the needed transformation on them, the impact it will have across the 17 SDGs will be tremendous. And that's how we see the acceleration pathway to take place.
In all of this, this is what one of the things you'll be looking to get your team or family, you and family in Nigeria, to work at, these 6 acceleration points. And how quickly would we begin to see traction?
Already we are seeing traction because I say it has been only 3 months that I have spent here, and I have engaged a lot across the board with ministers at federal level, the vice president, governor at state level. And what I'm seeing, and by the way, let me say that this is something which I have seen as a difference compared to the time I served here before. I'm seeing an increased appetite, an increased commitment to development, increased commitment to poverty alleviation, increased drive for people to transform and provide well-being to their people. And this, as I say, I'm seeing it across the board throughout all my engagement that I have seen here. Now, development for me is not humanitarian. Humanitarian is easier to do. You mobilize the resources, you do an intervention, you save life, you reduce vulnerability, you put back people on their feet. But, you know, it could have another shock like a conflict or a climate shock can come and bring them back where you were. While development is something which is more sustainable, which is building on the ownership of your own stakeholders, in this case here, the government at federal level, but the government at state level, where you have a more solid planning ground, building on solid data, building on solid information, but also interacting with the communities and understanding and including their own need and their own perception. Because the mistake we make often as a development practitioners, we think that we know more than the people we are serving. And I think now we have used a notion that is accountability to affected population. It is also to give them space and to listen to them.
Earlier you mentioned Nigeria being the largest country on the continent. The influence or the impact of the, in quote, failing SDGs or failed SDGs on the other Sahel, on the Sahel region, on the other parts of the African continent, is it something that can be caught before it gets out of hand?
It can be, and I think if I have anything I can share for being humble and happy to be brought back to Nigeria, is that it gives me a kind of unique opportunity in life to serve. Because we, UN, the only meaning that our job have is that how we impact on people's life. And I think when you serve Nigeria, you don't impact only on the people of Nigeria. Because Nigeria, the stake is so high, the population is so big, that when you have an impact here, the impact goes far beyond the boundary of Nigeria. You talk about the Sahel. A good part of the Nigerian country is in the Sahel. But not only that. If you look at the number of out-of-school children here in Nigeria, you look at the under-5 mortality, you look at people who are facing this or that deprivation. The numbers are so big that I'm always saying that if we don't make it in Nigeria, we will not make it anywhere else. And if we fail to do it in Nigeria, it means the failure of the whole continent. And that's one of the things that keep us, you know, as a team, to have such a strong drive for serving UN in this particular context of Nigeria. And I think that part needs to be really highlighted. You mentioned the Sahel, but for me, I see beyond the Sahel. and I see the African continent, and I see the global stage, the global world. Even if we don't make the SDG in Nigeria, or if we are off track, or we don't make progress, I don't see the world coming out of this by 2030, saying that we have achieved this for this big number of people, because that's what it comes to in the end of the day.
Then what happens when we do all this, when we go for all these summits, UN summit, the COP29, COP28? Those are just, some will say, just talk shops. At the end of the day, we gather, the leaders will gather, they will talk, and they will go back. The man on ground, the man in the hinterland in northern Nigeria, or the man in the hinterland in the southern part of South Africa, or the northernmost part of Niger, or Egypt, he's not aware of all of this. He's not feeling he's just, as far as he's concerned, well, our leaders are going together again. Is that the kind of summit we're going to have now?
I'm not sure that this summit for the future will be just like any other summit. I think, as I say, the timing it has come is something important. The issue that will be touched upon, like the peace architecture, the acceleration of the SDGs, the climate crisis, the offer for future generation and young people, getting the civil society organized. There was last week in Nairobi, the Civil Society Preparatory Forum, which gathers like over 4,000 people, including delegation from Nigeria, and the Secretary General made the whole way from New York to be part of it. Those are, for me, issues on which we need to reconvene and renew the vision and the hope that we need to share with the rest of the humanity. That's one thing. Second is that none of the process that brings back humanity into the way of hope, into the way of rethinking to build and leave a better world to future generation would be an easy way. It will be always a way that is very steep. But regardless how much steep it is, you keep driving and you keep having hope. You refer to the COP. COP28, which was the last one, has made a major breakthrough. The day of the opening, there was this lost and damaged fund that was established and pledged for over $100 billion. 2 years earlier, there was not there. This is why I'm saying that yes, this summit could appear as one among others, or another one that we have done already. We have done a similar one in the past. But what you have to always look is the progress you make. At some time, the progress might sound or might look insufficient, but you are making progress toward creating a better world for people. The person who is in a remote area, as you say, somewhere down in the Sahel or somewhere in a village, I don't know, nowhere in the world, those could have that perception that this is not for them. And this is why earlier in the conversation, when we were talking about building trust, I was saying to have trust also you need to go on your communication and your advocacy beyond the citizens who are in urban setting, or citizens who are connected to internet, or who have seen TV, because those shouldn't be left behind. And I think that's another factor. And the further you have also the engagement of the civil society, this way, bringing the voice that are unheard most of the time, bringing the voice of people who are unseen most of the time, is something which is important. And I will always build on something which is a bit personal to me, which is my optimism. As I say to colleagues, every night when I look at the world, or when I look at country I'm serving in, it could keep me awake. But every morning also I will see a peace that gives me hope. And that peace that you see it throughout so many things that goes beyond this conference. Yeah, and that's why I'm thinking that, yes, I'm still having hope in Nigeria to make it, hope in people to go out of their way and serve, hope in people to bring humanity where it's missing or where it's being questioned, hope to see government like Nigeria reinforcing multilateralism while it's being questioned in so many parts of the world. There are every single day way of getting hope.
You have witnessed that. You've seen Nigeria. Indeed, you've seen African countries. If you had a word for Nigerians, Africans and indeed the world as regards where we're going to? Rescuing the SDGs, getting them back on track, getting to where we need to in the face of the climate situation, which appears not to be turning, appears to just be plummeting. What would that word be?
Let me just say, across the continent, from this position, but from my previous position also, I told you I was regional director covering 21 countries. And every single travel I made, I have a special focus and an eye on the youth and on the young people. And reflecting on their conditions, on their struggle, it always brings me back to my own youth, my time of being a student, my time of being younger, the time I was shaping aspiration I had for me, but also the time I look at my children and see them growing and having the age of those young people. And if I look at my time, for example, at university, the anti-apartheid struggle was the one that was mobilizing us and galvanizing us. But now I look at what they call young climate activists. That wouldn't exist like during my time. The same way, I saw how young people, you gave the example of Senegal, are emerging now in the political arena. I'm just saying that each generation have a call. Maybe the generation of my father, their call was to liberate the continent from colonialism. My generation was maybe to continue the liberation through anti-apartheid or some of those ideas of equality and dignity for the African people. The generation of these young people is maybe how to better manage their countries. It's how to address the climate crisis, how to address the new and emerging challenge and keep away from extreme violence, keep away from terrorism. There are a number of things. But for me, what makes me happy seeing across the continent this vibrant youth engaged in this respective area, I was saying, at least one thing is clear. They understand that this is their call. This is the call of their time. The same way for our fathers, their call was the anti-colonial struggle, the anti-apartheid struggle, and generation after generation. And that gives me also hope that situation might be dire. As I say, the road might be very steep, but we just keep with the hope and seeing also these young people, their force, their drive, their innovation. And by the way, that's one of the part of the things what people never talk about in Nigeria. The ability to innovate that is in this country is almost unique in the continent, and I can say in the world. The cultural dimension and production in this country is almost unique. The private sector, there are so many areas that if you look at them, give you hope that this country have a potential of really completely shifting the needle. And the role that UN give itself is how to accompany those young people in their aspiration, how to accompany the country on its aspiration, how to really harness all this potential and all these opportunities that are out there, and just to stop looking at only the challenges. In every of these challenges, there is an opportunity that can help this country to play its role. And what I call the role of Nigeria is to be the leader of this continent and to be leader in the global stage.
Mr. Fall, I would like to say thank you so much. Thank you for speaking with us again. And finally, when are we going to have that jollof rice?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me in your program. Thank you to all your viewers and listeners. The jollof rice, I prefer we take it off the record because I want to treat you so that you come back on camera and say what you have experienced and what you have enjoyed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank you for participating in today's program. Your insights, we would like to hear. Just connect with us using the social media handles showing on your screen. Also, you can go back to this conversation or our previous conversations. Just go to our website, channelstv.com/podcast or youtube.com/channelsweb to get started. Until we bring you another edition of the program, I'm Neo Taigwe saying bye-bye.